Good evening and welcome back to Fireplace Conversations. My name is Vinsha Klute. I'm the Executive Director of the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance, and you won't believe, but it is the last session for the season, and you know that it was a winter series, so it is unfortunately the last session that we're going to have for the season, and we are excited that we're actually going to talk about a topic which is as important as all the topics that we have spoken about during the season. And we're really going to go into the governance of non-profit organizations and civil society organizations. So we'll touch on community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, charitable organizations and clubs, and whatever other organization that you can think about that is non-governmental or that is non-profit organization. And you know that non-profit organization is a type of a business organization that must operate and provide its services without primarily making money, basically. And a civil society organization or a non-governmental organization is also a non-profit voluntary citizens group which is organized on a local, national, or international level. And while NGOs can also be non-profit or not-for-profit organizations, they share commonalities of non-profit organizations, or rather I wanted to say that they can also be for-profit, but they share commonalities of non-profits on shared purpose, which is to provide service or to advocate a public policy or operate for the better or the good of the public. And both of them encompass different organizations, such as the ones that I've just mentioned when we started the show. So we would like to really discuss how governance can be enhanced in these entities by pointing out the shortcomings, as well as proposing the kind of improvements for governance to be good in this type of organizations. And tonight, to take this conversation, I'm joined by a really esteemed and very well-versed panel on the subject matter. And just right across me is Mr. Norman Chombe, who is a human rights lawyer, and he studied at the University of Western Cape in South Africa. He has litigated on several matters concerning the Namibia Constitution and international law in the Namibian courts, as well as in the SADC Tribunal. And he's also a lecturer of constitutional law at the University of Namibia's Justice Training Center, so he trains lawyers. And he's currently the deputy chairperson of the board of directors of NPTH, which is a state-owned company. He's really got over many years of experience in non-profit organizations, non-governmental organizations, and the topic that we're talking about tonight. And just next to him is Ms. Melanie Marquez, who is a passionate leader and a project coordinator with more than a decade of experience in leading, developing, and transforming organizations ranging from startups to well-developed players. She's worked in several civil society organizations throughout Namibia in promoting participation and advocating for transparency and accountability, defending human rights again, and working together with the government, the UN agencies, and other non-state actors. She's currently serving as the coordinator at the Civil Society Information Center. And then just next to me on my left is Mr. Ronnie Dampras. He has a track record of over 25 years development experience, primarily in civil society, of which 20 of those years he's been serving as an executive director of an NGO, including also serving on various boards in both the public and the private sector. And has deep-rooted understanding of governance and institutional arrangements, decentralization policy and governance mechanisms, project management and intergovernmental coordination processes within Namibia and the SADC region on civil society members. So really well-versed panelists. He is the executive director of one of Namibia's leading sustainable community development organizations, the Namibia Development Trust. And so with all this expertise, we really want to speak about what is not necessarily given much audience in terms of governance. And I think it's a very important that we don't only talk at the big corporations, the organizations that are in the main commercial mainstream, and that we also talk about other entities that are not not-for-profit organizations and non-governmental organizations who really deal with people's money and are also trying to promote a specific purpose. And so we want to make sure that governance is also good in these areas. And I'm going to start right with Melanie. Most NPOs, and we're going to say NPO for short for nonprofit organization, and CSO for civil society organizations. And so most NPOs and CSOs are member-based organizations, and so is our own, the NICG. And they derive their income from membership subscriptions generally. There is often little accountability on the part of the leadership of these organizations to create structures that will provide for accounting properly for these subscriptions that they receive. Can you please talk to us about some of the structures that are missing and that should be created to bring about reporting and transparency? So just focusing on reporting and transparency in terms of these subscription fees that we receive.
Good evening, Vincia.
Yeah,
it is an absolute pleasure to be part of the panel today.
Thank you.
Good governance has been a noteworthy reference throughout the world, and civil society has not been left out of this phenomenon.
Yeah.
It is very important to have good governance procedures in place to be transparent and accountable to the members of the organizations. Mm-hmm. And it basically helps to gain appreciation of the work that we do within our systems. Yeah. Good governance is an ideal that is difficult to achieve. Very few countries have successfully achieved good governance, much less the corporate environment, as well as. So the structures within civil societies, while it is very important to have good governance within our institutions, we note that there are sometimes certain areas that we lack in when it comes to civil society. We are governed by a board of directors who often sit on boards without any sitting allowances. But it is important. It's important that civil society needs to have regular audits, even if it means just adding it to the annual reports within the organizations. It is important that civil society also adheres to high standards of governance. This means that the functioning boards should have regular meetings that are well minuted. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to civil society organizations, they either registered with Section 21 or trust organizations. However, we also see organizations that run as voluntary organizations. Yeah. This voluntary organization has constitutions in place, and this constitutions then requires for the organization to be transparent and accountable to its members and to the donors where they get the funding from. So it is important to do regular proper minutes for every meeting, and it is important to do regular reports to record everything that happens within the industry, and that everything should be kept in a manner that it can be used for future references. Yeah.
Norman, do you want to latch on to what Ms. Marcus has said?
Yeah, well, I can agree with all of what is being said, and can only emphasize that doesn't matter what the capacities, the internal capacity of the board members or the staff that are working there. There's no excuse not to be transparent and honest and have the integrity with the resources that you have. These are by nature of a not-for-profit organization, is that it's generally not for the benefit of the individual members who are sitting on the board. Yeah. It's for a particular purpose, whether it's an identifiable beneficiary or beneficiaries, or just generic, like we work for the environment, or we work for elephants or rhinos, or, for sports and that sort of thing. There is always this particular public interest that is in that particular organization. And that's the membership that you have, and that's the membership that you have to be accountable to. So, every cent that you get in should be accounted for. And there's one thing accounting for the money, you're getting money and buying an expensive Mercedes-Benz when you should, and you can account for it. And there's all the vouchers are in place for that. But there's also the most important thing is that getting money and diligently spending it on the purpose of the organization, making sure that it reach as many people as possible and as far as possible. That's absolutely the most important thing. And we can say all about the lack of capacity in the not-for-profit sector or the civil society sector. The one thing that we have to appreciate is that despite all of that, despite the fact that they don't have a lot of money to pay good salaries, and in other words, to attract competent talent and retain that talent, they don't have the necessary skills to do what they want to do. You know, they are in, we have organizations that are in, you know, economics and analyzing the the budgets of the country and that sort of thing. There are organizations working with the protection of the environment and HIV and women's rights and children's rights and farmers and the like. They don't necessarily have the skills in that particular field, subsector that they are working in, but probably 90%, maybe even more of the people have their hearts in the right place. Yeah. They really, really wake up every day to go and do that work, and they do it so good that this country is functioning largely because of what civil society organizations have been doing. You know, they have kept together for instance, our rhinos in this country, particularly in the northwest of the country. The numbers have been increasing because of the anti-poaching efforts that have been done by people who just believed in that we need to protect it. They didn't study for it. They don't have academic qualifications for that particular work that they've done, but they have really, really stood up and said, I will do this, I will protect this, I will work for children, orphans, I will work for, you know, women's rights and that. And they have made a significant input in this country. We should not forget about that. People have very good intentions, maybe not the best of qualifications, but they have done what those with the PhDs and the like have not been able to do. And we need to acknowledge that.
And I like that you said their heart is in it. So the basis, I think, of a non-profit or a non-governmental organization really is that, you know, the purpose and the passion behind whoever is leading that organization.
Sometimes it's the Achilles heel that, you know, you're so passionate about what you're doing, and you then, you know, get a couple of people who are like-minded and have the same frequency. Then you get them together and you establish sort of, you know, you become more formal as time goes on. You know, I have a constitution, now you have staff members, you have admin department. But in the core of it, there are these passionate people who are there. They really drive the process. But, you know, we all know we shouldn't build institutions around personalities. We should build it around principles. And then you have this person who is so passionate, or group of people who are so passionate about what they do, and then tomorrow they're not there. They end up under a bus. What happens to the organization? You know, then that passion, that drive is not necessarily with the individual staff members who just come to work for a job, you know, to get a salary at the end of the month. And the people who were so driven, had the passion, had the understanding, and had the foresight of what they want to do are no longer there. They have either moved on, they've retired, and that's unfortunately the Achilles heel also with, particularly in Namibia, the you know, that we have these passionate people, and they are blinded through their passion by not looking at what is beyond me as an individual in future. But it's part of the problem.
I think that is what we're trying to address, is that, you know, I really wanted to say that passion is absolutely important to bring out and to carry out the purpose, Mr. Dempers. But what Melanie also has alluded to alongside Mr. Chombe is that besides that passion, there must be those structures in place, because you're dealing with people's money, you're dealing with donor money, you're dealing with member fees and so on. And I think people should always find value in where you put money, isn't it? She's mentioned a lot about minutes that are taken very well, and I think you emphasize on that part because you are reporting to a group of people, isn't it? But there are some organizations, you know, the non-profits or any of these civil society organizations, they don't have governing bodies, they don't have board of directors. What can we say about that? Who should be appointing the board of directors, and how can we get that right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, basically in agreement with what has been said so far. But I think it's important to locate the good governance within the context of civil society and the role that these organizations stand for. Because why that is important is civil society organizations, broadly speaking, fulfill a very important mission. The principles that govern these organizations, what they stand for, what they stood for. It's generally broad principles that are based on principles of social justice, equity, equality, human rights, democracy. Those are the high values that these organizations uphold. Therefore, the question of good governance is not a box-ticking exercise for this organization, or should not be just a box-ticking exercise for, yes, we had an AGM, we had a board meeting, etc. But it's about governance that contributes towards improving lives on the ground. Governance that contributes towards changing the status quo and making it better. Therefore, I think there is a much greater stake on civil society organizations to adhere to and to practice this good governance principles, and actually should strive to do beyond their call of duty. And therefore, the question that you have asked about having systems and structures becomes very, 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 very fundamental. And therefore, it is becoming more and more important that we should go beyond the passion and establish systems, what they call in the good governance language about the necessary checks and balances, that ensures that there is clear segregation of powers, there's clear segregation of roles and responsibilities. That is why boards becomes important. One of the challenges for somebody that has been in a non-profit sector, and generally speaking, is having good and committed board members is a challenge. And having, but non-profit organizations, as Norman has pointed out and Melania has pointed out, contribute to such a significant role to be able to play. And it's important to have board members that understands the purpose of the organization, because they need to set the strategic direction. They need to provide the necessary oversight to help the organization meeting the compliance requirements in terms of the different laws under which they are subjected to, but also serving the interest of those members whom they purpose to serve. So therefore, the question of establishing systems and structures that are necessary to ensure and enhance those checks and balances becomes very much important. And NGO structures or non-profit organizations should be able to attract board members, and we have been successful in some degree, that you find committed people compared to other sectors, like parastatals, etc. I get often shocked and surprised at some of the levels of remuneration that you find in some of the board members. And when I compare about the effectiveness of some of these structures, and I wonder, but we have got boards in non-profit sectors who really volunteer their time and effort, and these are professionals, who volunteer their services and who provide support to these organizations to be able to play their role. But there is need to, of course, continue to strengthen boards to be able to play their role. There is need to strengthen the management structure of these organizations, of course, ensuring that there is healthy checks and balances between that, who takes the decisions, who executes the decisions, who ensures that the decisions, that who holds it accountable. But there is also the other challenge about managing accountability within non-profit organizations. There is what they call the upward accountability, and there is the downward accountability. Many times NGOs or non-profit organizations have been forced into this drive towards upward accountability, meeting the donor requirements, meeting the reporting accountability requirements that are there. And we have very much neglected the downward accountability about the constituents that we say that we are serving, being able to listen to them, being able to be accountable to them. And I think for me, it's there's a healthy balance that needs to be struck between the upward accountability and the downward accountability. But I think, and I get to realize that we need to do more on the downward accountability because that strengthens the legitimacy of the non-profit organizations because of the closeness of and being able to hear what are the needs of those communities that we claim to serve. If we can know and understand their needs, we can articulate and serve them better. Not just to go and serve the interest of the donors and follow whatever the donors presuppose. And therefore, by doing that, we shall be able to best set the local development agenda that respond to the local needs on the ground.
I like what you said about, creating that balance, Norman, like there's, serving the interests of the donors. Obviously, the donors would like to see donors and member, subscription, people who pay subscriptions, who would obviously like to see these structures, systems, checks and balances, board of directors, meetings, etc. in place. And at the same time, the people who we're serving, the purpose that we're serving also wants to be carried out. How do we create that balance? How does the board create the balance?
Well, both of them are necessary. It's not like you must do a little bit of this and a little bit of this so you have a balance. You can't be saying like, I'm doing too much of this and too little of this. All of that must be done. That must be a job. The theory is that what we do in our own community-based organizations, where we collect ourselves together, form a committee to protect the birds in my neighborhood, or you have a national non-profit organization that looks at sports or that looks at all sort of these big themes or big issues and that sort of thing. It matters how we do it there because that's generally how we want to be governed. The way that I, as a board member in a very small not-for-profit organization, deals with governance issues is the way that I expect my president and my ministers and my members of parliament must also do that. So that downward accountability is lacking not only at the civil society organizations or not-for-profit organizations, but that's at our political party level. We have villages on record and say the last time I saw you as a politician was the last election. It's now again an election time, and you're coming here and you're coming to promise that you will do X, Y, Z.
And political parties are non-profits, right?
Generally, the structure is exactly the same as a non-profit organization. They don't distribute the profit amongst the members. Exactly. They employ it into the organization, so they by definition, they're exactly the same. But it's it's not just a political party, it's the individual, it's the churches, it's also just government. That government would always come and report back to its constituents. So we're creating this culture, this sort of acceptance of how matters should be done, whether it's at my local football club or my traditional authority, my church, my political party, my government. That leaders are people that you stand up for when they walk into the room. Instead, it's exactly the opposite. They're the employees of you as the members, and they should be bending on their knees when they see the person who is actually the one making sure that he has a job or he or she has a job. Whether that individual member pays, it's not the issue. It's all about that's what I'm serving, and they are the people who make my existence possible. Because if you don't have students in your class, you're not a teacher. It's the students who make the teacher, not the other way around. But in any event, that's unfortunately the culture that we're breeding, is that the accountability is completely lacking. But as I said earlier, it's not a question of I'm doing too much of this, so I have to do less so that I have a little bit more of reporting to my members. You should report as much as it requires to the person who pays the subscriptions, the donor, whoever. But you should also report and feedback and get a mandate, refresh your mandate every now and then from the individual constituencies that you're serving. So you should be going out. You should ask people. People send a development. Mr. Dembers is the expert in development. People send a development. What is it that you want in this village? And then I will structure my services to that. I don't come and impose, oh yeah, you need water. I will be concentrating water. So no, we have plenty of water. We actually need a school. So no. I decide that you need water. It must be people-centered. The people must inform the civil society organization, the non-profit, the community-based organization, the government, the political party. This is what we want. And then the service providers must then structure their services to be able to respond to that need of that community. So that's the downward accountability that is required.
Yeah, Ms. Marcus, that accountability, it has come up so many times on the show. We're speaking accountability. Every time we have a session, that word sort of just brings up, because I think it has become important that we don't just speak about governance, that we are holding people accountable to what they say and to their leadership positions that they hold. Who, in the structure that we're talking about, nonprofits and CSOs, obviously we are held accountable to the donor and to the constituents and everybody. You've spoken about board meetings, but what we have not spoken about is AGMs. And in my experience, there are many nonprofits that have never had an AGM. And I'm not talking in a commercial sense. It's just, bringing together a meeting where that accountability happens, where you're doing the reporting and speaking to how can we help our CSOs and nonprofits do better in terms of reporting to their members and their donors.
I think it's the operational structure within most civil society organization. It is structured in such a way that it's not a pyramid or where the power is concentrated at the top level and it comes down. It is rather structured in like an indaba set, whereby decisions are coming from various ends. So it is when it comes to AGMs and we now have the new word, the indabas, where people come together and discuss the issues. Accountability then comes in because of how the CSOs are formulated in such an informal way that they don't necessarily feel the need that a lot of people should be involved in the direction of the organization. And it's also partially about the succession within the organizations. We have found that various civil society organizations has been led by one individual or a group of individuals, and then some boards have had the same board members for years, and there's been no change and no effectiveness within that board. But they have this because they started with this organization, they have this this belongs to me, that this hold onto that organization to say that it is my direction that we follow, and not based on what is coming up afterwards and so on. But it is that sense that we follow it. This is how I did it. This is how we've been doing for years to come, and this is the structure that we believe should be followed through. So sometimes it's necessary to bring in new ideas, to bring in fresher minds. And I don't just say this because I'm youth. I've been part of this sector for over 10 years. And we can see that when we have new versions come into, new people come into this place, we then start holding ourselves accountable, because sometimes we get funding because of the reputation we've held for years, not necessarily because of the structures we have within our organizations. Some donors are very relaxed about it. However, with the recent state of our country, whereby a lot of funding has gone out because we are considered to be a middle class income economy. So with that, it becomes, and also the donor structures have become very strict now, therefore requiring that civil society organizations has all of the structures, governing structures in place to make sure that targets are reached. And with new civil society organizations coming into the space, it causes for competition. So therefore you are required to act accordingly. You are required to bring that one step forward with your governance structures, with your reporting structures. You need to have an open book plan whereby everybody can see what is happening within your organization. With the Civil Society Information Center, we encouraging civil society organizations to sign up, but there are terms and conditions.
Yeah.
The terms are that you need to be an active civil society organization, and we should be able to see that. You should not just come to us, we've been operating for 10 years. What is your proof that you've been operating? So that the phenomena of this governance has become so strong within the new organizations and within the new structures of funding that you are called to act. You are called to take responsibility and take accountability for the funds that comes into your account.
I like that perspective that you're bringing. But doing all those things, and we've spoken structure, and we've spoken about good governance and all of that capacity, Mr. Dembers. You have, all of us have, and I am a CEO of an NPO. The nature of a non-profit organization normally is that it's a small entity run by 2-3 people. And the structure is generally small, unless you're getting really huge donor monies, or you've got, funding coming in from somewhere that you can improve your structure. Mr. Dempers, there is always capacity or human resource issues with these entities. Now we're talking all these structures and everything in place, and we're also talking parallel to that. We're talking about purpose and making sure that while I'm running the office properly, I'm making sure that I'm serving the purpose. How can we improve the structures? What are some of the ways that we can improve these structures? Because it's like she said, sometimes you find that a person, I'm the CEO with the technical expertise for the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance. So I have the technical expertise in governance. And so instead of focusing on the technical expertise and driving the strategic purpose of the entity, so much is subsumed in terms of responsibility into one person, especially in nonprofits. What can we do about that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, those are some of the challenges. Non-governmental organizations generally are challenged to be able to have large paid staff to be able to carry out roles and functions that are required. What I've seen many non-profit organizations is their reliance on volunteers.
Yeah.
I think there is not a short supply of people out there. Generally, there are more people that are willing to be able to engage in making a difference. And one of the ways that we can do is to be able to say, what kind of structures do we set up within our non-profit organization that can engage this large army of people who are willing to come in to be able to make a difference? What kind of systems do we put in place to be able to do that? What innovative reward mechanisms do we develop to be able to reward volunteers? And rewarding does not necessarily only involve money, but it's basically appreciating the contributions that these individuals make and be able to celebrate those different contributions that these individuals bring about. I mean, I'm partly the organization that I have been working for so far support community-based organizations, which are also very small entities at a very local level. The conservancies, for example, in Namibia, we have got 86 conservancies. These organizations are able to maintain themselves. Not all of them generate income. There are about 86 of them. It's about 30 plus that would be able to generate income. But all of them are able to maintain basic structures. People that volunteers to work as community game guards. When I talk about game guards, are people who are walking on foot to be able to look after their natural resources. In many cases, these people are not being paid or being rewarded, but they are able to carry out good work that is helping that local entity to be able to manage their natural resources, wildlife, rhinos that we have been talking about. And it's through that process that they have been able to establish themselves. And because of that process, they have been able to generate income. And now some of them have started to pay their game guards. Some of them have been able to pay their staff, etc. So it's about when you start initiatives like managing or setting up of a non-profit organization, not many a times you have got the resources, you have got the luxury to be able to attract good levels of people that you can reward. but look at some innovative ways that you can employ people, that you can reward people, appreciating. I mean, thank you can go a long way. Of course, we are working in a culture and an environment where we see, where we are promoting these cultures at local level, and local communities agree with this. But when you look at broader society, well, people see that, okay, those at other levels have been rewarded at such a level for doing almost nothing. And these are things and these are trends against which we are working to say, well, what is the culture that we are promoting? So what I'm saying is that we are trying to build this kind of a volunteerism culture within non-profit organizations, but that has been greeted by a wave of self-centeredness about not really standing up towards some of those values.
How can we deal with that? Trying to inculcate a volunteerism culture, but also making sure that people are not self-centered, because you find that there's a lot of reliance on with the governing bodies, the boards and committees that we've established. We rely on them as working committees. They come to do extra work. They are not just there like commercial entities where they are just making decisions. They also actually put in their hands to the plow. How can we create that culture?
I think firstly, when you join a non-profit organization, you should know that the goal and the orientation is about doing good to the next person. It's almost rising to the call about love your neighbor as yourself, doing a good service to the next person. So you sort of are in the service of the people. You forget about yourself, but you are seeing how can I make it good to the other person? How can I contribute to the general good of my society, my community? And we have seen many great examples of how communities have organized themselves through a small way to make it good to the next person. And I think we need to find innovative ways to be able to celebrate that culture. In Namibia, we have got this International Volunteers Day that has been observed, and that kind of a day, I think it's somewhere in November. That is a day that is under celebrated.
I think so, because I've never heard about it.
Yes, and that is the kind of a day that we should be able to identify, and celebrate the men and women out there who, with little or no pay, make good to society and work in the common interest of people. And I think celebrating, rewarding our volunteers, even just with a proper thank you, appreciating that handshake, good handshake, celebrating them through different ways are, for me, some of the ways that you can do.
Yeah, so I think that you actually create this culture by literally inculcating a passion that you have, and I'd say you try to, I'm trying to find a word for it. You try to influence, basically, the people that are working with you in this organization, in the all levels of the structure, to have the same values and culture, right? And to have the passion. But so he's talking about being a volunteer, and I think that's a great thing, because that's really the nature of these type of entities. But now to speak about how do people stay alive in these entities, the bread and butter issues, how do you deal with that, Melanie? What has been your experience with this type of entities, trying to get that balance of, trying to create or influence people to have the passion, but also making sure that you keep and retain those talents and the help that you are getting?
I think the word retain is very difficult and foreign in the language of civil society.
Exactly.
Because of the type of funding cycles that we have.
Okay.
Within civil society, most often the longest term for funding would be 3 years. And oftentimes, even those with the offered, like the contract work, would then be a yearly renewable contract. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about volunteers or interns, possibly the best type of reward for them is the experience that in the capacity building. I think that's one area that civil society has within them to build the capacity from ground up going forward. I myself was a volunteer before I came into, so I started as a volunteer, and through volunteering I reached the level where I'm now the head of the civil society information center. So that sort of influences, and that sort of shows other people out there that while you don't have a job at home, you can still come and build up the experience. You can still come and work with various people. Within civil society, it is not just the local work that you're doing. You work with foreign structures. A lot of times with the foreign aid that we get as well, you get to see other countries as well. And there's a sort of incentives that volunteers can take advantage, And while you're within the structure, you meet certain individuals who are able to help you reach the various levels you'd like to reach within your career, even because there are opportunities that comes whereby you could be funded for further studies, or you could go as an exchange to another country and so forth. So maybe not financially retaining them, but when you're looking at these aspects, and when you start influencing in a manner that you look at the values that you getting while you're within that organization, the passion that you get on. As young as I am, I've tried the corporate world also, but I think my passion lies in community work, and if I can influence that onto other people, I think it comes easy. And in as much as it's difficult within the economy right now, sometimes money doesn't play that much of a role as opposed to the value that you can get,
that you can bring,
that you can bring across.
The concept of volunteerism is not only for the unemployed.
Exactly.
You understand?
I think so. That's good.
We have got many professionals who are volunteering in the non-profit sector, that are serving for the common good, who are not receiving any payment for serving on the board of trustees, etc. I mean, I recall that Mr. Norman Shombe was a board member of Namibia Development Trust some years back, and we have got such examples. Even currently, Namibia Development Trust Board, we have got professionals who are qualified in their own right, but who volunteer their time to be able. So volunteerism is not a thing that you do because you don't have any employment opportunity, but it's in a way giving back to the community in a different way. And that's why I would encourage any other professional out there, to say, if you want to do common good, the non-profit organization serving in one or the other way is one way of giving back to your community. It is, of course, does not mean that non-profits should only rely on the volunteerism culture. We should look at ways of compensating and even paying well for our well-deserving staff, and we're providing the staff. So it's not a place of where you are underpaying people.
Yeah.
I mean, I have been in the service of the non-profit organization. Not that I'm earning a wonderful salary, but all my years of work has been in the non-profit sector. You understand? And have been able to sustain myself, my family, etc. And non-profit organizations, if we do good work, if our governance systems are proper, if we can demonstrate impact for our work, we will attract resources to be able to do better, and will be able to retain good staff. So good governance is also about being able to deliver on your mission and being able to demonstrate impact. And I think if we can find the right balance, and if we can find the best ways of doing that, I always believe that well-managed organizations will always attract support for the kind of work that we do. And if we attract support, we should be able to employ and retain staff that will be able to drive the organization to achieve its impact.
Norman, what has been your experience? And I want you to latch on to that. You've been with the LAC, I know, for a couple of years, for a number of years, and also in other nonprofits. You've served on different non-profits. I know of that.
I've been with the legal assistance since I was 16. So,
Wow.
Yes, we can't just depend on people providing volunteer services.
Yeah.
And it's not just for the unemployed, and that's where we need to shame people. This country doesn't have a culture. The corporates don't have a culture of philanthropy in this country. These institutions, Namibia Development Trust, the Information Center, the Legal Assistance Center, the IPPR and all of this, and the many, many others that are out there, are institutions, homegrown institutions that belong to Namibia. These are people who have gone beyond the call of duty. In fact, it's like a calling that they have been doing, whether they work on natural resources, on HIV, on orphans, on women's rights, the youth, agriculture, etc. They have really put in a lot of passion into it. And I want to know, if you take the corporates of this country, the very, very wealthy organizations, the companies in this country, the banks that have declared enormous amounts of profit over these years, what do they contribute as part of the social responsibility towards these organizations? Without saying a lot about the marketing that goes with it,
Of course,
it shouldn't always be tied to that. There are organizations that are not marketable, that they cannot market your product. If a bank gives money to a small organization sitting out somewhere in Grootfontein, that organization has completely the inability to market the product, but they still need the money. What they're doing is absolutely an important job. And we need to see what these corporates are doing in that sort of instance, where they, 1% of their profit or whatever that they give to civil society, non-profit organizations, community-based organizations. And that's, a lot of the governance problems that are there in civil society, not finding any excuses for that, but has a lot to do with lack of money.
Exactly.
You have this one person who is chairperson of the board, who is CEO of the organization, and the accountant, all in one. Because they just simply don't have the money.
And everything.
Yeah, exactly. They just simply don't have the money to pay all of those different people.
Yeah.
So the watchdog is also the person who is being watched. If they have the resources, they will do that. And these organizations can do that. I mean, I've been the chairperson of Nankov Trust, the umbrella organization of, together with Mr. Dember. We have been on the board of Namibia Development Trust. I've been at the Legal Assistance Center as an employee director and now also a board member. We have been trying to get corporates to say, contribute by going to our external auditors and say, listen, can you not do it for free? Because that $200,000 or, $50,000 that you're paying in audit fees can be a contribution to our funding, because that $50,000 that I would have paid the auditor, I can now pay a salary
Resources, yes.
For someone, or I can buy a vehicle so that I can serve my constituency in Epupa Falls or wherever it is. The telecoms provide donate the time, the invoice that they sing, can that be deducted or reduced as part of the contribution to that? Can a medical aid come forward and say, listen, how many staff members do you have? Out of the 10, 3, the fee for the subscription for 3 people will be free, as a contribution to your services. So that, but you now need to demonstrate that money that you would have paid for the medical aid for those, that is actually going directly into this particular activity or project or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what we need to do, and we need to then appreciate these corporates who do that. But 22 years of professional life working in civil society organizations, unfortunately have to say they don't do that. My profession, where I have full-time lawyers, the lawyers who provide free legal services are far and few in between.
True.
Shamelessly so.
True.
Because that's the one profession that makes awful a lot of money in this country. You will hear lawyers always complaining that they don't make money. It's simply because they don't make more money. That's the reason why they complain. they can provide, there's so much need for legal assistance services in this country. People are poor, their rights are being abused. The wealthy can obviously litigate their rights, they can negotiate their rights, but the poor are the ones who need it so desperately. From housing issues, from access to schools and discrimination, from being beaten up by the police, the army, or security guards, or land rights issues and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, my ilk, they don't come forward to say, look, I will help this person, and that becomes the part of the contribution to society. Through organized structures of civil society organizations, or just directly, an individual client and help that. We don't do that. Unfortunately, very, very few do that. Ask me. I've been managing an organization. I was employed there for 16 years, doing exactly that sort of thing, where they provide free legal services to people who are unable to pay. So I know exactly what lawyers are able to do and are not doing. And then you can replicate that to each and every profession in this country, where you could use your time on between one day of the week, between 5 and 6 o'clock, providing that free service of whether it's an accountant, auditing firm coming to do the books for a small organization, just so that they compliant and that sort of thing. HR person coming to help out, the professional HR person helping out an organization to make sure that their contracts of employment are in order, and then leave days are properly calculated and that sort of thing. Just think about it. Just every person in this country can provide that type of service to civil society organizations, and we have absolutely no reason why not. I must say, this country is where it is largely because of that type of services that these civil society organizations provide. I want to be challenged on that. I will put my head on a block that this country is an absolutely wonderful country with all of its defects. It's the most wonderful country to live in, and largely because of what people's passion has been driven to establish what we have today.
Wow. I was actually blown away by just that proposition that, entities can do more for CSI, and we're always thinking of money. They can give money, but there's also that of expertise, and just upskilling places and just helping with whatever skills that you're able to do. And we've got viewers from everywhere, and I've got viewers from Malaysia and people who are just, texting us from everywhere. And I've got a few questions, and we are actually unfortunately coming to the close of this session. It's such a very, very quick hour, I must say. One of the things that we're really talking about is, you've just mentioned something important, and it brought about a question to my head, which is what Ms. Avas is also asking from social media. Is really that, yes, the entities can come and be philanthropic, right? And the way we reward them, even when we cannot really market their services and their products, is that we are accountable, right, in our carrying out of our duties, roles, and responsibilities. So this somebody's asking here, if the board is failing, an NGO or CSO or non-profit board is failing its roles and responsibilities, who can take them on? Who's gonna basically keep them accountable? Is it the CEO or is it the members? Who's taking that responsibility when the board is failing?
Yeah, well, there are lots of problems in the structure, the architecture of how do we deal with an independent organization that has its own board, and they're not doing the work. Of course, the law is there, and the fiduciary responsibilities that individual board members have towards the organization is there, and you could challenge them on that. But unfortunately, one of the things that we looked at NANCOF at the time was to have a self-regulatory process where we say that the rest of civil society organizations will come together, help out another organization that is in trouble, including removing board members and putting in temporary board members. Of course, resistance was there from various sectors that, don't come and step on my toes type of thing. But it has to happen. Look, the passion, the good work that you do, and all of it can never be an excuse not to be accountable and transparent. That must be foundational in every organization. Is that I need to be accountable. I need to be transparent. I must have the integrity. I must not steal the money. I must provide, use the money proper,
for its proper purpose.
whatever the purpose, and diligently. I mean, as I said, don't go buy an expensive pen simply because you have the money to do that. You still can buy the cheapest and still execute your job that you had to do. So that's foundational, and we need to work out a system that, like in private companies, how do we get rid of the board? The BIPA and the sort of governmental authorities can then step in and say, look, we need to remove you. For those organizations that are trust, the master of the High Court is obviously responsible for that. But there's obviously a lot of them that are not
under any structure.
There's sort of no superstructure to make sure that they would be responsible, and if they're not, that they will be removed. We need to work on that.
Melanie, that's probably an important question for you, because you literally in the space of civic society, the information center, and probably bringing everybody together, civic plus 264. And I think what you've said about putting a body together that holds the rest accountable, I think that's important, and making sure that your purpose is perhaps seen by all the CSOs and non-profit organizations, and that they come to work together.
Yeah, so there needs to be proper internal controls within every civil society organization, and it should not be as Norman had just mentioned before. Like it's not just about the passion that you bring. Everybody has a job description, even if you get that minimum salary. So for membership organizations, at the end of the day, the members can remove you if you're not serving for the purpose. But then within the board as well, whether it's in the trust deed for voluntary organization, whether it's just in their constitution, there are clear guidelines, clear rules as to what are the terms that could get you removed from the board, and what type of actions could be taken upon. So sometimes the person that needs to take up the decision to remove the person from the board, which is the chairperson, could be the one at fault. But then you could still have the other board members come together and remove them. I think civil society has also come to a point where they deal with certain issues in corporate manners, We cannot be nice about everything. Sometimes we need to make that difficult decisions, and we have now organizations who have taken that strict decisions to say this is why you've been elected to be part of this board, and if you cannot serve the purpose, and not just there's even rules about if you're not committed enough to be on the board, then you need to be removed, even if whatever that you have, the minimum support that you have given has been impactful in the past. So there more and more there becomes strict rules as to how you become a board member, and how you can retain your position as a board member. Because at the end of the day, it's the reputation of the organization that you carry. And if you want to keep getting funds, sometimes even the donors come into play, whereby they can come in to say, we are not happy with the performance, and they could assist in having the board members removed.
Absolutely. And there are so many other questions that are actually on the platform that I would have loved us to go into. But like I said, that hour really does go by really fast. So we cannot, attend to all the questions, unfortunately. And I really want to close the session by calling on my panelists, or requesting my panelists to give us closing remarks and a thought that you want to leave with non-profit organizations in terms of, or in relation to governance. What is it that we can do, the one thing or the 2-3 things that we can do to improve the governance of these organizations? We've already identified that they are really critical for our society and for Namibia generally. So what is that one thing that you want to say to the leadership of these entities? And as well as, I think you've already spoken to corporates, you've spoken to the wider community, but what is that one last parting thought? And I'll start with Mr. Dempers.
I think non-profit organizations should not only preach good governance, but should practice it. We should mirror the kind of society that we are advocating for.
Yeah.
Our organizations must reflect well-governed, well-managed organizations, because that's the kind of society. If we cling on to power forever and ever as a board member or as a founding member, that's not the kind of society that we want, because that's the culture that we are projecting in some of the civil society organizations. You have been the founding trustee, but you are still there for 20, 30 years. Does it mean that democratic culture has not gotten hold of that organization? Because that's not the kind of a country that would like to have a life president in Namibia, for example.
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years, even at government level. That is the standard that we have pressed. And I believe within non-profit organizations, we should have better standards that we can adhere to. So, and if there are cases where board members or management has abused the powers that are given unto them, people in non-profit organizations must have ways that they can take up these issues. I mean, Norman has mentioned some places like Mastov High Court where these organizations are officially registered. We can certainly use the constitutions or the trust documents as basis of that. There is the Access to Information Act now that is in place. This is not only for government, it's also for civil society organizations. If we need particular information about a particular non-profit organization, we can request this. And that non-profit organization should be obliged and is obliged to be able to publish that information. And I mean, ACC, Anti-Corruption Commission is there. These institutions and instruments are there for us to help that. Of course, non-profit organizations, I would love to see them as self-governing entities that have got strengthened systems that are able to manage themselves and to mirror the kind of society that would like to see.
That they wish to see, yes. Ms. Melanie?
Leadership is at the core of CSO, civil society governance, and it is therefore very important to have effective leadership within civil society. It is important that there are well-written bylaws within civil society, and that the language is easily understandable to everybody, and that everybody takes up the role and responsibility within each structure that they are placed in. The bylaws are the crucial cornerstone of any organization, and mainly for civil society, because of the continuous existence of the organization depends on those laws that they have in place. And good bylaws, they basically imply honesty, they imply transparency, accountability, and responsiveness, and to be participative in everything that you do. And that goes for, we've mainly spoken about the board of directors for organizations. They need to be part of the organization, to take part, be participative in every action in order to know where they're driving the organization to. And as we've largely spoken about, there needs to be that culture of people friendliness, understanding the people that you're working with, being compassionate about the work that you do without putting your integrity aside. In as much as we are very dependent on donor funding, we must not let this the need of dependency cripple our integrity.
Yeah.
Because yes, we know we can't ask questions about transparency to somebody that sponsors us money, but then we as civil society should start and have a strong hold onto where it is that we want to drive our organizations and how we want to drive it, in as much as we need that support from external donors.
I like the last point, because that was one of the questions that was raised, so you've answered that. Norman, your parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think the other two panelists have said what I wanted to say, and I've also mentioned a number of other issues that I would want to see. But do we have formal training at tertiary education on governance of civil society organizations? No. Do we accept that civil society organizations play a very, very important role in Namibia and elsewhere? Yes. And then we should now then recognize it formally that they do play an absolutely important role, and that we have to have formal training at high school level, at tertiary level, so that we have the capacity. if we start, we should have started with this 33 years ago. But as they say, the best time to have planted a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time is now.
It's now.
So let's do it. let's start having fairly formal way of training it, because there are a lot of aspects are similar to the profit corporations,
yes.
For-profit corporations, but they are quite unique in many instances. And just managing talent, managing people in our civil society organizations where we're so largely dependent on volunteers. How do you manage these volunteers? How do you get them in, and how do you make sure they get the proper training and they're doing the work and they're accountable, even though you don't pay them, that they actually are accountable. Those are all aspects that we don't see necessarily in private for-profit organizations or companies, and we need that sort of training formally for it. We have 3 universities in this town. We have so many high schools, and I can tell you now, none of the curriculum includes any reference to that.
And I think we picked that up when I started working with the NICG. We picked that up, that we have sidelined the nonprofits and the CSOs from governance, and that's what we have now started to put a focus on at the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance. So not only are we partnering with them, not only are we involved in their own agendas, and not only are we asking them to be a member of ours, but we also now reaching out to them to create platforms for training. And this is exactly why we have this session, because we don't want to exclude this very important group of organizations that should also be taught about governance, because they drive really important purposes in our society, and we want to acknowledge that. So those are great points that you have raised. I want to thank you so much for giving us your valuable time and serving on this panel tonight. It was really an exceptional session, which I wish would go on for another hour, but the hour really does go so swiftly. Thank you so much, my panelists. I appreciate your time. And the NICG this season of Fireplace would not have had a great session or a great season if we were not sponsored largely by the Capricorn Group, and we were also sponsored by ICANN monetarily, and we also partnered with the Namibian newspaper, who has made sure that all of this that you see and is being aired is reaching the places that it is reaching. So we want to thank our sponsors, and we want to thank our partners for partnering with us in the season of Fireplace Conversations. Norman has talked about how, corporates can come in and just allow us to do some things. And one of the things that the Mining Expo has allowed us to do this year is that we can actually exhibit the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance at the Mining Expo next week for free. And we don't have to pay a cent for that. And this is how we promote and enhance good governance in Namibia. And this is how entities are helping us to do that. So we want to be thankful to all the entities that have supported us to do governance well this year. And I want to leave us with just this one line: let us do governance right together as a nation. Thank you so much, Namibia, and we'll see you next year. Not only Namibia, but everybody who's watching us from all over the world. We'll see you again next year at Fireplace Conversations from the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance. Have a good night. Thank you.